Ray Rice story has put domestic violence on everyone's mind this week, far beyond the NFL, across all lines of race, class, gender. So has his then-fiancee, now wife, Janae Rice's reaction to the uproar. The hashtags Why I Stayed and Why I Left have blown up this week. Everybody has a story. This hour on point, domestic violence all over, and the dynamics around it, inside it, with the woman who launched the hashtags. Have you been down this road? How did you survive? Before I turn to my guest this hour, I want to play a striking piece of tape for you. You may have heard it last night. The cloud of Janae and Ray Rice's story hung all over last night's Thursday night football broadcast. CBS dropped from the show the song Run This Town, performed by Jay-Z and Rihanna, and show anchor James Brown delivered a powerful 90-second soliloquy on domestic violence. Play the whole thing for you right now.
I challenge the NFL community and all men to seriously confront the problem of domestic violence, especially coming on the heels of the murder-suicide of Kansas City Chiefs football player Jovan Belcher and his girlfriend Cassandra Perkins. Yet, here we are again, dealing with the same issue of violence against women. Now let's be clear, this problem is bigger than football. There has been, appropriately so, intense and widespread outrage following the release of the video showing what happened inside the elevator at the casino. But wouldn't it be productive if this collective outrage, as my colleagues have said, could be channeled to truly hear and address the long-suffering cries for help by so many women? And as they said, do something about it, like an ongoing, comprehensive education of men about what healthy, respectful manhood is all about. And it starts with how we view women. Our language is important. For instance, when a guy says, you throw the ball like a girl, or you're a little sissy, it reflects an attitude that devalues women. And attitudes will eventually manifest in some fashion. Women have been at the forefront in the domestic violence awareness and prevention arena. And whether Janae Rice considers herself a victim or not, millions of women in this country are. Consider this. According to domestic violence experts, more than 3 women per day lose their lives at the hands of their partners. That means that since the night of February 15th in Atlantic City, more than 600 women have died. So this is yet another call to men to stand up and take responsibility for their thoughts, their words, their deeds, and as Dion says, to give help or to get help, because our silence is deafening and deadly.
Anchor from CBS, James Brown, there before the football game last night. That is not a speech that you have ever heard before an NFL game. We did last night.
I really don't know if I'm going to be able to maintain my composure and get through this thing without blowing several gaskets, trying to understand this whole... Yes, I'm frustrated. This story and the constant barrage of stories like it just anger me to no end. I am getting so... What am I talking about getting? I've been. Ever since I started realizing that I was being sold a bill of goods back in the day when I thought that I was a feminist. And in a sense, you could still probably use that term with me on certain situations, although I'd rather deviate away from the anything feminist, masculist, whatever, and cast my lot with a more descriptive term, which would be equalist. But almost nobody practices or preaches the philosophy of equalism. So it's sort of like, pick and choose. And as I say in my life, I stand on the side of right. Whoever's bringing forth the truth and real knowledge, and they're trying to promote fairness, balance, and equality, that's what I stand by. I'll support whoever presents that position at the time. Unfortunately, we live in a world of a bunch of what I refer to as agenda frauds. So even as you take on the issues of one side, there's a whole bunch of baggage and BS that they bring along that they expect you to just sign off on automatically and become part of their little clique. And I won't do that. And that's why I've always said that if you do not have a target on all sides of you, and you don't have arrows from every side pointing straight directly at you, then you're doing something wrong. Because the world that we live in order to stand on the principles of right, fairness, and justice and equality, you have to make enemies with absolutely everybody at some point. That's the only way it can be. That's the only way our nature is going to allow us until stuff changes. Let's put it that way. Now, however you want to believe that, if you want to believe that we're flukes of the universe and eventually the cosmos is just going to wipe us out completely, that'd be the best thing for us if that were the case. Those of you who want to believe in a more spiritual, higher intelligence angle of it, and believe that our religious texts say that eventually all this stupidity is going to be washed away anyway, and it's all going to be uprooted anyway, that's going to be the best thing for us in that situation as well. Either way, the stupidity has to be removed and the ignorance has to be brought to an end. And I honestly think that it has to be one of those scenarios that's actually going to be able to fix the problem for us. Because we are too wrapped up in our own agendas and our own way of trying to view the world, or our own way of trying to shape the world, that we will never, ever get to the point of where we're going to try to see things from a position of fairness and equality. I just don't see it ever happening, and this is just more evidence of it. Now, I don't keep up with sports, so all this mess talking about Ray Rice, I have no idea who this man is. I only learned just within the last couple of days that he plays with the Baltimore Ravens. So that's all I pretty much knew going in these last couple of days. And I first started hearing about this story just the last few days, and I was thinking that, well, maybe I'm getting in on it late because I don't keep up with sports and I don't keep up with celebrity. So this is just something that it just slipped under my radar. Well, from the appearance of things, it looks like I got in on it pretty much the same time everybody else got in on it. Maybe a little bit later, but this is relatively recent news. So, as I said, not my forte, so I just bowed out and I just said, well, okay, whatever news comes out as a result of it, I'm an information sponge, so as things become part of pop culture or part of the conventional wisdom or whatever, eventually things will stick to me. I'll become aware of certain things. Not to say that I'll delve into them and I'll just become wrapped up in them as most people typically do with hero and celebrity and stuff like that, but I get a little bit of an awareness. And so, especially when things are constantly being thrown in your face, like how often do I have to keep being reminded that Robin Williams is dead? You know what I mean? So, here's this thing with this guy, Ray Rice. My first encounter with it was family member telling me something about it, and as I always keep telling this person, it's like, look, don't talk to me about sports. I'm not into sports. I don't keep up with sports. Don't talk to me about celebrity. I'm very limited into how much that I get myself wrapped up involved in celebrity lifestyles. If they do something as an entertainer, which I think is something that I can appreciate the work that they do, and they actually do a good job at what they're establishing themselves as, i.e. an entertainer, then yeah, I might learn a little bit about you and about some of what you do as far as your technique and stuff. But when it comes to your personal life, I don't give a shoot. I don't care. Your life is so much more than mine that I'm not going to waste my time feeling for you or empathizing with you and knowing that I got to live and struggle throughout this life, and I'm going to, shed a tear for your hard times because you couldn't buy the new yacht for your grandson. Give me a stinking break. I don't care about that stuff. I have my own issues and my own life to worry about. Instead of shedding a boo-hoo tear or, getting all wrapped up in who married who and what relationship this, that, the other, screw that. So things of that sort, if I catch wind of it, I catch wind of it, but I don't try to find out about any of this stuff, and I try to stay as separated from it as much as I can. I'm more about the real deal when it comes to life in this world. I want to know about how these politicians are trying to screw me over, say. I want to know how these corporations are trying to poison me, say. You see where I'm getting at? So, celebrity and entertainments and sports figures and all this other stuff, not my idea of a good time. That to me does not feed my knowledge need. So as I learn about it, I learn little bits and pieces, and I just go from there. I don't delve into it. unless there's something pertaining to it which pertains to real life, as this Ray Rice thing does. Because here we have another situation where when I first was being brought to attention about it, of course, it was the whole thing about the whole violence against women and blah, 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 which I've always heard before, and I know that, that a lot of times that's BS. But very shortly after I had heard about this, I saw a video where I saw this big burly black man cock this frail-looking black woman in an elevator. Boom, down goes Frazier, and immediately followed by a press conference that this woman and her husband gave, telling the public and telling the media, leave us alone. Yes, we had an incident. Yes, we worked through it, or we're working through it. You're disrupting our lives. Just leave us to live our own private lives and let us go about our business and let us work on our own relationship. Stop bugging us. Now, in one aspect of that, it sounds honorable. Because typically, that's one of the reasons why I don't think I could have ever been an entertainer. Because I enjoy my privacy a little too much, to where I want somebody constantly just digging in my trash and just stalking me and trying to figure out where I'm going, who I'm going with, and I got to worry about my children's safety and stuff of this sort. That's not my idea of a good time. So her plea on that level was honorable. But keep in mind, this is the first time that I saw this video, and I saw this woman getting knocked the F out in an elevator by this big, violent black man. And of course, he's a football player, so you got to keep in mind that the sport is a violent sport. And the conditioning is you respond to your surroundings and to your situation with acts of violence. And that's why when he started talking about Robin Givens and her little thing with Mike Tyson, I'm like, well, what did you expect? I'm sorry, I'm not justifying it, but you decided to mess around with a man who had a violent history already and whose lifestyle was sustained by engaging in acts of violence. And I had the same situation in Hawaii where these girlies are trying to either get off the rock or they just think that I'm going to do some world traveling, whichever of those two, or maybe a little bit of both. And you've got this wave of these local girls going on these dating sites flat out saying, I want a military man. Or going out and schmoozing up to these military guys, trying to find their ticket off the rock. And my advice has always been, be careful what you wish for. Because if you're going to deal with a military person, you have to keep in mind the very first thing that they do the moment you step foot on a military base as a new recruit is that they will strip you of your humanity. They are in the business of turning you and reshaping and readjusting your brain into becoming a killing machine. Your whole life now is with an outlook of reacting to situations with acts of violence. And surely you would have to expect that that would carry over into your intimate relationships, even though they have harsh penalties for instances of domestic violence in the military. But again, I ask the question, what do you expect? If you're going to become intimate with violence, then expect at some point that you might become victim to violence. That's all I'm saying about that. Even though, as I said, there's no justification for it, but that's the reality. You have to be on guard and prepared for it, and especially you should be in a situation where you don't do anything to trigger violence against you. So here's this situation with Ray Rice, and I'm watching him just deck what I found out later to have been, at the time, his fiancee. Actually went and married the girl. And I said to myself, well, there you go. Another case of thug love. Here she is getting knocked around by this brute because, he's got the swagger, or he's got the money, or he's got the fame and the glory, whatever the heck. And that's more important than her physical well-being. So to her, it's worth it to get smacked around and knocked around and then defend him. After the hammer starts to fall, he starts losing all of his endorsements and all this stuff, be over this mess. That was my initial reaction. But a little bit later, like a day or two later, I saw a little bit more of that video. And I said, oh, so there's something more to this story than what they've been trying to pass off on us. because the part of the video that I saw the second time showed this, again, little frail-looking woman stepping up in this man's face like she wanted to throw down with him. And as soon as she did that, down went Frazier. I said, there's more to this story. Somebody's hiding what really went down here. Everybody's focusing on the big, bad, evil black man who just beat up on this poor, frail, innocent little black girl who did nothing wrong, because remember, there's never an excuse to hit a woman. And I told my family member who initially brought this to my attention and who watched that portion of the video along with me, and we both came to the same conclusion. Now keep in mind, this family member of mine is a woman. And when we both saw the little extra snippet of that video, we both came immediately to the same conclusion. There's more to this story. This isn't just a matter of some big black man just losing his grits and then just hauling off on this little poor, innocent, defenseless black woman. And I just said that right then and there, that I said, I'm going to try to find the full-length video of this mess. And I tried to hunt the thing down, and the reason that I spent so much time trying to track the thing down is because I wanted to try to find something that was not connected with that bitch-ass TMZ. I mean, that's, to me, is like one of the trashiest trash sites that the internet has to offer. That's brain-dead Central Station as far as I'm concerned. So I wanted to avoid that at all costs. Unfortunately, I couldn't. Because somehow they got the exclusive rights to whatever the heck it was with that video. Nobody else has a copy of that video, apparently. Nobody else was able to get their hands on it. These jackoffs managed to have the only copy of it, which is getting spread around in a viral situation. So I had to watch it with their little watermark on it and everything, and constantly be reminded it's from these assholes that I had to watch it from. But I did watch the thing all the way through. And that's when the truth came out. And I said, now I understand why she's defending him. Because, see, the dirty little secret that everybody's trying to cover over to make it seem like it's big bad men beating up on poor innocent defenseless women again. So here's all this stuff. Evil, bad, nasty men just beating up on poor, innocent, defenseless women. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. This is more evidence about male violence against women. And you got this ass-eater, what's his name, James Brown. Hey! You know, some sports announcer named James Brown. I don't know who this jackoff is, but I can tell by listening to him he's a black man. If I'm wrong about that, I can be corrected on it. But he sounds like another pussy-whipped, bitch-slapped black man who's trying to simp up to black women or any women at all, trying to make it seem like, you see, men can be gentle, men can be, and we can kiss your ass, and we can do a mea culpa, and we can say that it's, we appreciate because you're our queens and you're our goddess, and we just do everything. And like, excuse me? I hate to keep using language like this, but bitch hit dude first, and second, and third, at least for what we could see, because we're going by the video that was available, remember? And so little bitch beat James Brown wants to talk about how, based upon what we saw in the elevator, based upon the part that you only wanted to see, because the part that everybody keeps covering over, even while they were in the elevator, was that she backhanded him. Then after he pushed her away from her, shoved her back from her, she got up in his face again as if she wanted to do some more to him. That's when he cold-cocked her. That's what happened inside the elevator. But nobody wants to talk about what happened outside the elevator just before they got inside the elevator, though. As they were walking toward the elevator, bitch slapped dude again. Or previously, I should say. So from what we saw on video, we saw her backhanding him once outside the elevator. Then inside the elevator, she backhanded him again. He shoved her. She got up in his face again like she wanted to go at him again. That's when he popped her one. And everybody's like, he knocked her out! No. She went down, and as she was going down, her head hit the handrail inside the elevator, and that's what knocked her out. But even if he did knock her out, Good! Now, I'm against violence against women, but guess what? I'm against violence against anybody. And as we've always been trying to say, if you want to step up to a man, then you better expect to go down like a man. But she didn't really hit him all that hard. That didn't matter. She shouldn't have put her hands on him unless it was to caress him, to hug him, to stroke him, to grab his nuts and say, I'm going to give you some tonight, something other than violence. But she came at him with violence. And it didn't have to hurt. It was the signal that was being broadcast. And you mean to tell me that, oh, just because she didn't hit him all that hard, that it's all right, that he shouldn't have hit her back, or he shouldn't have hit her as hard? Well, ask me this question then. What would a man have done had it been another man doing the exact same thing to him, huh? If it had been a man just backhanding him, but not really hurting him, but just kept hitting him and just kept hitting him and just kept going, getting in his face. You think that the man that was happening to would not have equally cold-cocked the man that was doing that to him? Or better yet, let's do it this way. What if it wasn't a man at all, but what if it was a woman that she was doing that to? Say instead of it was her fiancé, let's say it was her lesbian lover. Now keep in mind that there are many studies out there which show many lesbian relationships are actually more violent than heterosexual relationships. Oops! Oh, that's that dirty little secret that feminists and these dyke carpet munchers don't want to let that cat out of the bag, do they? Because remember, women are sweet and innocent and non-violent. They're always going to be about loving relationships, and they're always about working their problems out. So, what's the story now in our new scenario? One woman smacking her lesbian lover like that. You expect that she wouldn't get the same reaction? Okay, let's take lesbian lover out of the equation. Let's just say it was a woman getting up and smacking around another woman like that. Could have been her cousin, could have been just some gal she met on the street, could have been her best bud, whatever. You mean to tell me that if that was a woman that had that being done to her, that she would not have responded in kind? Get the F out of here. So here's more of this big bully man stuff that's going on. Talking about how bad and evil and vicious men are by beating up on these poor little demure little innocent flowers. Well, while everybody's screaming and hollering at and feeding your brains constantly with all this violence against women is wrong, where are the voices screaming out for advocating for the end of violence against men? Oh, that's right. We're being called misogynists and we're being called rape supporters. We just want to go out there and we just want to find excuses just to beat up on women because we're just these big evil brutes that if we didn't have these shaming tactics constantly in our face, then we would just do anything to have our license to just go up and beat up on women. So that's why studies like this are always being conducted. Here's one that was conducted by the University of Florida and the University of South Carolina, where it states, quote, a 5-month survey of 2,500 students from both universities revealed that 32% of women said they mentally, emotionally, or physically abused their partners, compared to only 24% of men. Oops! That sounds like more women are actually engaging in some sort of emotional or physical or mental abuse than their male counterparts. In the other study, 25% of 1,490 students surveyed admitted to having been stalked, with 58% of the stalkers being women. Oops! That sounds like more than half of people who are engaged in stalking. You know, that song by Sting, every move you make, I'll be watching you. You know, a lot of people listen to that tender tune associated with it, but listen to the lyrics. That'll tell you what the real story is behind that song. And now here we go, an actual survey that says that you're more inclined to be stalked by your female partner than by your male partner. Oh, and who conducted this again? Oh, Angela Gover, a criminologist at University of Florida. Angela, let me think. Is that a male name? Oh. So this was a survey conducted by a woman, and the results were that you should be more concerned about the violent and stalking nature and behavior of women than you should of men. That sounds totally bogus. That can't possibly be true. I mean, those numbers are skewed, right? Well, just read a little bit further. Donna Leclerc. Another woman. So now we're going to get a more balanced view, right? Now we're going to see that what the real numbers are, that it's really all just men who are just doing all this evil, nasty, brutish, and intimidating behavior, right? Donna Leclerc, Executive Director of Domestic Abuse Shelter Homes in Sarasota, Florida, is not surprised by the study's findings. We're definitely seeing a developing trend in our group, Leclerc said. In the 1,100 victims of family violence that we see in a year, I would say that 30 to 40% of the victims are men as young as 19. Oops! So not only is that a woman saying that she recognizes the trend of violent and intimidating behavior by women against men, but she's also the executive director of an abuse shelter system. This is not looking so good for the big, bad, evil men routine that we keep getting force-fed, and that women are always the innocent victims that are always have to be on guard against being killed and being murked and being beaten up and being abused in one way or another. So, I don't know, here are women actually acknowledging that, men have to worry about violent women too, but what typically happens to women who acknowledge the truth in these matters and recognize that, hey, we may be all for the end of violence against women, but hey, there's a dark, dirty secret here that by us beating the drum of no violence against women, there's too much of a turning of a blind eye to the fact that these women who are enjoying the perks and benefits of, well, you can't hit me because I'm a girl, but that gives me blanket immunity to beat up on a man because I know, see, he's not going to hit me back, see, because he'll get called an abuser, and he'll get called a woman beater, and he'll get called all these nasty, vicious names, and he'll have to go to anger management and all this other stuff. So I'm in the clear, so I can do whatever the hell I want to. And if he does hit me back, or if he does cold cock me, or if he does retaliate in kind, then he gets to look like the big, bad, evil ogre. I get to skip away scot-free. All I got to do is knock on the door of the National Organization of Women and say, "He hit me!" And men get browbeaten just like this James Brown up there doing his little similitude act of talking about men need to be made more educated about violence against women. Well, hey, what about the women who are calling out women saying, hey, we need to talk about women's violence against men? Oh, they receive things like death threats. Don't believe me? Does the name Aaron Pizzey mean anything to? Of course not, because nobody knows who Aaron Pizzey is. You know why? Because Aaron Pizzey is persona non grata in the very shelter movement that she is credited with starting. The very shelter that she opened in Chiswick, England, is credited as being the first such shelter for battered women. And she was the feminist national hero, and she was just women's champion until she wrote a book where she revealed that many of the women that came into her shelter to escape the violence in the home that they were receiving at the hands of their men, that these women were just as violent as the men that they were seeking shelter from. And rather than saying, oh, is that the case? So maybe we ought to advocate that domestic violence is a two-way street, and so men should not hit women, which is good and honorable, but maybe women shouldn't hit men either, and especially when we find out that a lot of the violence that's coming from men is actually the result of women actually initiating the violence that's being lashed out against them. Hey, maybe we ought to take our women's studies and our concerns for women and actually show that we really are about women's rights and all by making women better people. So not only do we want to advocate against them getting beaten up, but we also want to advocate for them to avoid doing the things that might get them beat up. Is that what these fembo, lesbo, diesel dyke carpet munchers advocated once they realized women's violent tendencies? No. It's like, you're not demonizing men, so this shelter in Chiswick that you founded, we're going to scratch you off the founder's rolls. We're not even going to mention the fact that you founded this shelter and you can't come back here. You're persona non grata. You have been shoved down the memory hole. And Aaron Pizzi goes around and says, well, okay, well, I'll just do the next best thing then. I'll just go around and I'll give lectures. And guess what happens? She receives death threats. I believe at one point somebody poisoned her dog. Her children's lives were being threatened. And were these coming from the big, bad, evil ogre men that just want an excuse to just beat up on women, and so they're going to take their frustrations out on the woman who founded the battered women's shelter movement? No, these death threats were coming from women. The very women that this battered shelter movement was supposed to be helping, you know? You know, the poor innocent victims who were just helpless and were just so innocent that they did absolutely nothing to receive all this nasty treatment from them. That's who they were receiving these death threats from. Don't believe me? Here, let me pull this up for you. Now, keep in mind, none of this is new information. I mean, we've been trying to talk about the realities of women's violence against men as far back as the late 70s. Probably even earlier. You know, since the early to mid 70s was the time when that whole women's lib and that ERA stuff and the NOW was flexing its muscles and whatnot. And so they were really going on strong about becoming advocates against violence against women. Well, people decided that, well, hey, we really want to show how bad the situation is, so let's conduct some studies. And oops, what do you know? The studies even then revealed that, no, domestic violence is not just a one-way street. There are almost as many women that are beating up on their men or abusing their men as there are men beating up or abusing their women. Most of us are familiar with the, well, I won't even say most of us because most of us aren't even aware of those figures, but the FBI statistics, which talked about for every something like 1,200,000 women that are victims of domestic violence, there are something like 800,000+ men that are likewise victims of domestic violence at the hands of women. But, you know, most people don't know about those statistics because they get buried and swept under the rug. And here's a part of the reason that shows that that's just par for the course. I'm going to read this verbatim. It says, quote, "For example, in 1999, a Justice Department report supported data from 1980 which showed that wives hit their husbands at least as often as husbands hit their wives." And it goes on to say that the study was conducted by Terry Moffat. I'm going to stop reading right there for a moment because I want you to note the spelling of the name Terry. Terrie. So we got another female who's conducting the study now. Continuing the quote, "The study was conducted by Terry Moffat, a University of Wisconsin psychology professor." Now here's the key. When the study was first released, it was so controversial that some of the researchers received death threats. Close quote. It says further on down that similar things happened in, of all places, Canada, which is even more liberal than, I mean, they're so liberal they make us look like extremophobes in a lot of instances as far as their treatment and placation of women and the female sex up there. But here's something that talks about, quote, "A 1999 study in Canada shows that women are just as violent as their spouses and almost 3 times more likely to initiate violence in a relationship." Now catch this. Even though the data was from a 1987 survey, the answers from the women were never published until 1999. Instead, just the men's answers were published, and they were used by who? Feminist groups as evidence of the epidemic of violence against women, according to the National Post, which is one of Canada's main newspapers. This led to a 2-year, $10 million
national inquiry into violence against women. And there were 494 recommendations aimed at changing attitudes in governments, police departments, courts, hospitals, and churches. Again, involving violence against women. Not domestic violence across the board. Violence against women, specifically, exclusively. And so further in the article it states, quote, a University of Calgary sociologist, Eugen Lepre, I'm assuming that's his name, it's a German name, and it looks like his whole name's German, so that's how I'm pronouncing it. He told the Post, quote, it happens all the time. People only tell one half of the story. He reported that his research shows similar patterns of violence against men.
Close quote. So let's see. Covered over research data that exposes female violence against men, and the release of such information gets met with death threats. I thought women were pure, divine, and innocent, and just, you know, nothing bad to say about women. There's not a violent streak about women. Women are always the perpetual victims. Men are always the perpetual perpetrators. Isn't that what we're always being shoved down our throat? You know, how much longer are we going to keep swallowing this garbage? So, another study that I brought up states the following. And this was released by a publication that's associated with the American Psychological Association. In all of its charts and forms and whatnot, which I did review, it becomes quite evident and quite apparent that women are twice as likely to throw things at their partners. Women are slightly more likely to engage in pushing, shoving, and grabbing of their male partners. Women are more than twice as likely to slap their partners. Women are about 3 times more likely to kick, bite, or punch their male partners. Women are equally or twice as likely, depending on the time they've been in a relationship, to actually beat up their male partners. And women are twice as likely to threaten their male partners with a weapon. But men are so much stronger than women, and men hit harder, and men do this. Well, okay, so men hit harder, usually, granted. You know, men may get a little bit more out of control sometimes, maybe. But look at who's initiating the violence, number one, and then as violence progresses, look who's resorting to the most, okay, you know, I don't even have to say. It's there for yourselves. All this research is out there. Come on, I mean, you know, even the BBC had commissioned a poll, a BBC program called Here and Now, and they had commissioned a poll to be done. And one of the things that they found, and this is something else that nobody really gets to emphasize, because we're always talking about, you know, men are just violent by nature. And then when violent men do come to the fore, and they say, well, hey, I was drunk or I was high or intoxicated or whatever, and they try to, oh, you can't use that as an excuse. There's no excuse for him. Well, okay, well, the BBC Maury found out that only 4% of women explained that their behavior, their own behavior against their men, was because of being drunk or on drugs, compared to 10% of the men. Okay, so there we go. So according to BBC Here and Now and Maury, it seems that a higher percentage of men become violent when they're intoxicated or otherwise drunk or doped up or whatever the heck it is. But notice the numbers, though, how low those numbers are. 10% of men admit to being intoxicated or high, or however you want to describe that or refer to it as being part of what sends them off the edge. So if 10% are being affected by drugs and alcohol or whatever, it says that only 4% of women can actually use that as their excuse. So if only 4% compared to 10% of the men
only 4% of the women are using I was high or I was doped up or I was intoxicated or I was drunk or whatever it is as their excuse for being violent, then that tells you that more women are abusing their men with a clear head than men are abusing women. Ding, 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 hello! You know, what does it take? How many studies does it have to take in order for us to wake the hell up and realize that we're being sold a bill of goods by these feminized, pussy-whipped, wannabe shining knights out there who just take all this abuse of men being called dogs and animals and beasts and brutes because we want to appeal to women because we think we're going to get a sniff of vagina. How dare you? I've said it before, just like these fake phony feminists say it. There's no excuse to hit a woman. That's bullshit, number one. There's plenty of excuses to hit a woman if a woman puts herself in that situation where she's going to make herself get hit. Same way as if a man does it. But violence against women is never a good idea. I agree. But violence against a man is also never a good idea. And it doesn't matter who's initiating the violence, male or female. As one should not be hit, the other should not be hit. As one should not do the hitting, the other should not do the hitting. I divorced my wife because the indications were there that it was going to turn into a violent relationship. And I swore that I would never engage into any sort of domestic violence dispute in my relationships. It was not going to happen. And when I saw that that's where the tide was turning, see, it didn't have to happen. All she had to do was draw back a fist. That's all she did. She didn't hit me. She didn't smack me. She didn't shove me. She didn't do anything physical to me. But the moment that she gave indication that she was getting ready to head down that path, that was the deal killer. I was not going to give her the opportunity to lay a violent hand on me. So I got out, and guess who got to be the bad guy for getting out of that situation? That's right, the one with the penis. Because men are always in the wrong, don't you know? He left his wife destitute. How did I leave her destitute? I wasn't working at the time because part of the reason was that she kept preventing me from working because she thought it was more important to live off of the government dole than to actually have a man to actually go out there and work for a living. But oh, don't you know that the man was the one for the blame, both by her and by all of her friends and everybody who was taking up her cause because you got a lazy bum of a husband who won't go out there and get a real job. Never mind the fact that I was prevented from getting a real job because in order for her to get her damn welfare, I had to do some damn job training for these welfare people, which actually took my prime time, which would actually been used to actually go look for a job, so I couldn't look for a job. In other words, a vicious perpetual Mobius strip cycle that was forever to be unbroken as long as she continued to hold her hand out and get her little AFDC and her little food stamps and her little money on the side for subsidize this, that, and the other. But no, I was the bad guy. And I was so much the bad guy that I was the one that was going to get hit in a relationship. And when I decided I didn't want a relationship that was going to turn violent and I got out of it just so the relationship wouldn't turn violent, I was the bad guy. Fuck you! And you wonder why we get angry. You wonder why we get tired of getting pissed upon and crapped upon. You wonder why we get to the point where we just say, F it. Screw it all, I'm done with women. Not saying that I'm going to go and start weenie riding or anything of that matter, but, if the alternative is that and just being celibate or maybe if I need sexual gratification that badly, there was this guy that was on Oprah. It was on Oprah. It was on Sally Jesse. There was this guy who it was a thing of pride for him to say that, no, I'm not getting involved in relationships with women. I'll never get involved in intimate relationships with women. I don't want to get married. I don't want a girlfriend. I don't never want to have a relationship. Yes, I have sexual needs, and when I have those sexual needs, I just go down to the street corner, I call up a call girl. What does your mommy think about that? My mom knows. Oops. Well, what do you think about that, Mom? He's a grown man, and for everything that he's explained, I don't blame him. Oops! So boys' own mama knows what women are like and what they're about. And she's even saying, well, hey, if that's how he wants to do it and he doesn't want to put up with the hassles and the stresses and the strains and the all the negativity that can come from having an intimate relationship, then I'll be right there supporting him. Just long as he doesn't hurt anybody, he doesn't commit any crimes. Well, of course, prostitution is a crime, but still, under the table, out of sight, out of mind, until somebody finds out about it. But, I'm beginning to understand guys like that. Not saying I want to become one of them, but I'm saying, look, it's all, there has to be a breaking point somewhere. And I know that, for me personally, I put the brick wall up and I just say, black woman, thou shalt not pass. Unless I find something so special about you or so unique about you that I could say, I'll leave a little bit of a crack in the wall open for you to squeeze through. And if you get through, and maybe if you convince me, I might unguard my heart a little bit. But understand, my heart is guarded. But general rule, boom, African American woman, sorry, gate's not wide open for you. Everybody else, come on in, feel free. But now it's getting to the point, maybe I might want to think about starting to close that door as well. Because I don't think I can take much more of this. I mean, what happened to us being counterparts for one another? Whatever happened to us being, we were supposed to be complements to one another. And even in situations where there's some stress and tension in these relationships. I'm not saying those are good relationships. I don't believe they're good relationships. Some people will say, oh, hey, we have good relationships and we fight and we cuss and all the other thing, but we make up and everything, and we both get involved with each other, and so we both know where we stand, and if that's their relationship dynamic, and if that's what works for them, and if they acknowledge it, that's the difference now. If they acknowledge what they've got, and they're not trying to pass blame and pass the buck from one side or the other or whatnot, and they recognize they've got a dysfunctional relationship, and that's what they're cool with, that ain't my cooliana. You know what? I won't agree with it, and I'll say I won't want that for myself, but if that's their dynamic and that's how they want to work it, and they're honest with what it is, I'm not going to say yay or nay about it. That's y'all's thing. You do it your way. Not for me. Thank you very much. But if you get in these situations where you have this dysfunctional dynamic, and then everybody wants to play this finger-pointing game as if that it's all just one-sided. Well, if it's all one-sided, okay, granted, I'll understand that and I can appreciate that. But then I ask the next question, why are you staying in that type of relationship? Oh, it's for the kids. No, it isn't. Because if you're concerned for the kids, you get out of that situation. I'm sorry, you do not subject your children to something like that. If you're really that concerned for your children. But, whatever reason you stay involved in it, but if you start playing this game of it's all happening because, and nothing's going wrong, nothing that I'm doing is contributing to it, yeah. Let's just say that, sure. No problem here. I don't disbelieve you at all, boss. Nope. I totally believe you. Yeah, right. So, it's just more of this crap. I'm just so tired of saying, and I'm not saying that men are the greatest thing on the face of the earth. I know we've got problems. I know that we have tendencies. And sometimes they can be pretty damn destructive. They can be pretty damn foolish or what all. But you know what? We can acknowledge where we have those faults. But allow us to acknowledge them when they're legitimate. Don't pile and dump us with all the crap, and don't dehumanize us and belittle us and just totally degrade us into thinking that we're less than human or subhuman or just, relegate us to some realm of insignificance or you're just there and we just have to tolerate you because women are so much more noble and so much more deserving and whatnot. For every damn thing that we do for women's convenience and to get shit on like this, I'm beginning to understand that whole MGTOW movement now. I used to think that these guys were a bunch of extremophobes, and I still think they are. But I understand the raw emotion that drives them now. I see where they're coming from.
And that's the way I see these MGTOW guys right now. I'm not saying that they're 100% on everything that they advocate, but I do understand the passion and the philosophy. I do. So it all comes down to, at some point, you're going to start turning people off. People like, there's this vlogger who goes by the name of The Ignored Gender, has an excellent series about how men are degraded and dehumanized and just made to be treated as almost non-human or completely irresponsible, violent, stupid, of no consequence, and how this is just being force-fed us through the media, through television, through advertisements. And it's just an endless cycle of man-bashing. And there's just no appreciation and no recognition for everything that men do. If anybody were really honest about it, that if they were just think about what would happen if men just all of a sudden, just tomorrow, just said, we're not going to work for a month. We're not going to do anything. Nothing. All we're going to do is we're just going to sit on our ass. We're going to go fishing. We're going to go play golf. We're going to go travel. We're going to go hiking. We're going to go hang gliding. We're just going to go play basketball with the boys, whatever. We're not going to do anything that keeps society moving. We're going to just take an entire month off. Who's going to dig in your coal mines? Who's going to build your bridges? Who's going to build your malls? Who's going to pave your roads? Who's going to fix your plumbing, both inside the house and outside in the streets? Who's going to cut down your trees which are hanging precariously over the power lines? Who's going to do the mechanical work on your vehicle when it breaks down? How long of a list do you want me to lay out for you? Really, think about it for a moment. If men just all of a sudden decided that we're just going to stop on a dime, that we're not going to do anything that keeps society working, that keeps it sustainable, that we're just going to call a man strike just to get the point across that we are needed in society, that we are not only an important cog, but we are the most important cog in the machinery that is society. How long do you think that experiment will last before women would come running and begging and pleading and offering all kinds of pussy to get men back into the system? But see, they don't think of it or see it that way, because as long as they have their conveniences, and as long as men continue to provide their conveniences, and as long as men continue to be the whipping boy without recognizing that they are the driving force in this society as far as what keeps it going and what keeps it moving, then what do women care? Men are just there at their disposal. And unfortunately, a lot of men are waking up to this, and they're just leaving relationships altogether, especially with the divorce laws and the child custody laws being as jacked as the way that they are. And at this point, I can think of only one person right now who I would even give a spark of consideration in that area for right now. But outside of that, anybody else coming in, knocking on my door, as I said, I don't know. I just don't know anymore. Would I want it or do I want it? Yes. But is it priority in my life? No. Would I die without it? Well, we all die, of course, but, it's not going to be that big of a deal for me. It's not anything that I make priority in my life. And I'm of the philosophy of, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, shrug of my shoulders, whoop-de-doo. I have more to live life for than to worry about whether or not I get any, or whether or not I get to share my life with somebody of the opposite sex. Because I'm already pretty much determined on not having any children, so, without that hanging over my head, what else is there? Sex? Okay, yes, sex is good, I understand that. I like sex just anybody else does. So, do I miss it? Yes. When I get it, do I enjoy it? Usually. But is it the driving force of my life? No. I'd love to have it in a committed relationship. That's always the ideal, and that's always been my ideal. But outside of that, if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, no pun intended. But that's where I see it. But if it means that I have to get involved in an intimate, bonded relationship with somebody in order for that to happen, as I said, it's something that I would like, but let's just say I'm not holding my breath anytime soon. because I've been there before. I've been there several times. I made the put it on paper and put a ring on it commitment once, and the smarter half of myself is saying, well, that's, one time too many, but I'm still of that mindset too that says, okay, hope springs eternal. Maybe, just maybe the right one will come along, and I just might buckle and cave in, and maybe, hopefully, it will be the absolute right one. But as it stands right now, I don't see anything that's going to be happening in my life where I'm going to be convinced that it's going to be worth all that time and effort and stress, because I just don't see how. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just don't think that we're appreciated as we should be as men. And I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying we're angels. We have a lot that we need to work on for sure. But so do women. And wherever there's work that needs to be done, we need to be able to fess up and say, okay, here are our shortcomings, or here are the things that can help make us better people as individual people and as a collective of people. And hopefully that translates over into, well, now, since we're becoming better people as people per se, maybe we can help make a transition over into being a better intimate partner when we decide to try to share our lives with somebody. But that's not the society we live in. In this society, intimate relationships are all about conflict and animosity. And that's not an ideal way to go. And it's always going to be about conflict and animosity until we come to the realization that we can't keep playing this boogeyman game of saying that men are just nasty, vicious, evil, corrupt, violent, brutish, and have no sensitivity whatsoever. Because as long as that's what we're going to be portrayed as, and that's always going to be hanging over our heads, then more and more men are just going to come to the conclusion, why bother? Why even bother? If it comes down to getting a sexual release, there are professionals for that. Get the job done, go home, don't have to worry about all this other stuff to stress us out throughout the rest of the day or the week. That's just kind of like my take on this whole thing. Just it's time that we really stop. Just stop with the demonization, at least about the things where we shouldn't be demonized about. As I said, I've got no problems with calling us out on the things where we really do need to work on. I'm all for that. I'm about all of us becoming better people. Male, female, young, old, in between, whatever. But if we're going to be constantly singled out, and we're going to carry the burden for all of life's ills and for all of society's ills, then as more and more men drop away and they just throw up their hands and they say, I just don't give a shit anymore, I'm not going to fault them. And neither should you. End of line.
Wake up!